Do you know your past? Do you know where it is? It's only where you think. Do you know that every relationship you have, close your eyes, just close your eyes. Just close them. Okay, where's your husband? Where's your wife? Where are your children, your grandchildren? Where's your ex-spouse? They're all in your mind. Open your eyes. Now they're gone. Close your eyes. There they are again. They're just in your mind. You carry your relationships around in your mind. And if your thoughts about your relationships are on what is wrong, what you don't like, what you hate, what they did to you, that will be your experience. And you will materialize or manifest more and more of that pain into your life. If you look at what you love about them and make that the focus of your attention, that will be the nature of your relationship. It's the greatest secret in making any relationship work. It's so simple. Always focus on what you love if you want that to expand in your life. When you look at someone that you're in a relationship with, look at what you love. Because what you think about is what expands. I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. About not giving energy to the things you don't want. Because what you think about is what expands. And if what you're thinking about what you don't want, then more of what you don't want will just keep showing up. It's the only way it works. So now I'd suggest to everybody in this room and everybody listening that you take an eraser to all of the wounds of your past and you just send them away. And don't make them your calling card anymore. And bring the presence of God to those problems. And the presence of God is nothing more than a higher, faster energy. It's all energy. Everything is energy. As Einstein said, nothing happens until something moves. And spiritual energy is just energy that moves very fast and at very high frequencies. And problematic energy is very slow and very low frequencies. And when high, fast frequencies are put in the face of low, slow energies, they are nullified. They dissipate. They can't survive. There's a song that they sing at a lot of the churches that I speak in. It says, "Surely the presence of God is in this place." It's a great affirmation. Anytime, or the affirmation from A Course in Miracles, I can choose peace rather than this. But surely the presence of God is in this place. Every time that I have a conflict with one of my children or with any place, I just bring that line to bear on what is I am experiencing right now. I just bring that line to bear. Surely the presence. Because there's no place that God is not. As the little child in India in the 7th century, who was an avatar, who was really God in a human form, and everywhere he would go, people would be healed just by being in his presence, just like St. Francis. He'd be seen in the village, he'd be seen in the valley at the same time. Lights would emanate from his body wherever he would go, and everyone in the village knew that this was a child of God. This was God in their village without the benefit of an ego. This was an egoless being who had shown up in their village, which is what I believe our great spiritual teachers were. Like there's ways to reach highest levels of consciousness. One of them is to take on an ego and then spend a big hunk of your life seeing if you can shed as much of it as you can. Which has been my path. But there's another one where you just show up and you never take on an ego in the first place. There's only been a handful of those in recorded history. And this little child was one of them. And the elders in the tribe knew that this was God in a human form. And they went up to the little boy and they said to him, trying to bribe him, "I'll give you an orange," they said, "if you can tell me where God is." And the little boy, without hesitating, said, "I'll give you 2 oranges if you can tell me where God isn't." It's one of the very fundamental precepts of this entire program, is that there's only one power in the universe, and that is the power of God. And that whenever we see evil, It's nothing more than love going in the wrong direction, away from its source. And all we have to do is figure out a way to get it to turn around and start returning to its source. Because there's only one power in the universe. And every time we think that we are in something that isn't good, like a problem, like disorder, disharmony, disease, discomfort, what we've done is we've used our mind to create a separation from God. And as long as we are moving away from that source, from that spirit, as long as we're moving opposite of that, those problems continue to manifest. But if we can somehow figure out a way to turn around and move back in that direction, we can eliminate it.
Are my wishes in alignment with my highest self? This principle invites you to choose which possibility you identify with and to live as if it had already occurred. If you place into your imagination wishes that are misaligned with your highest God-realized self, you will find yourself frustrated and immobilized. God is love. If your aspirations in any way are outside of this mantra, you will feel lost and you will not succeed. If God is one, then God is incapable of being divided. If your desires involve conflict for yourself or anyone else, then you have brought two into the picture. That is yourself, as well as the second party who might be harmed by the fulfillment of your wish. God being only oneness wherein all things are connected, and God, your highest self, being love, cannot even recognize the dichotomy that you bring to the picture. If God acknowledged a desire that would bring harm to anyone, God wouldn't and couldn't be God. How could that which is all one recognize two, which is needed in order to have conflict, and still be God? This is what happens when you attempt to manifest from a place of selfishness or potential harm to anyone else. You invoke the ego, which is always about winning, overpowering, being better than others, accumulating for the sake of feeling superior, achieving for adulation or recognition, improving your status, and so on. And again, ego is edging God out. I love the way Neville speaks to this point. Quote, "You never draw out of the deep of yourself that which you want. You always draw that which you are, and you are that which you feel yourself to be, as well as that which you feel is true of others." Unquote. So in this manifestation activity, the secret is to feel yourself as already being and having what you desire, and to keep the entirety of it all wrapped up in a spirit of love. By all means, place into your imagination the idea of living a prosperous life. But this in no way implies from a God-realized position that you desire a fancy watch, a luxury automobile, a large infusion of cash, a palatial home, or anything else that is for the purpose of elevating your position among your peers. This immediately involves conflict, two-ness, you and those who you are attempting to impress with your being in some way superior. Staying aligned with your source of being means no one is in any way better than anyone else, regardless of the monetary value of their stuff. Can you ask out of love, live and feel as if what you desire is already a present fact, and then allow the universal source of all to provide with no concern about appeasing the demands of your ego? If demanding and insisting is your style, do it from a place of pure love. Be willing to give it all away in the name of that love. Stay in that place of pure humility. If you desire to purify your body and live from a disease-free place of perfect health, simply assume the feeling of love throughout your body and live as if it were your reality. Not to impress others, not to have special privileges bestowed upon you because you are more special and thus more deserving of this healing, but purely out of your humble sense of gratitude for being in a state of well-being. Albert Einstein once famously observed that all he wanted to do was learn to think like God thinks. This means living and manifesting from a place of all-encompassing desire to serve others, to be love, to ask nothing in return for what you give. In other words, to simply be love. Get your ego out of the picture and draw out of the deep of yourself, as Neville expresses it. And the deep of yourself is truly your highest self, which is, of course, God. Let the God that you are, the God that Jesus said you are, the God that is your very essence, your deepest self, let this be the energy you draw upon to fill your imagination. And then, Know that you are fully aligned with the only source that is responsible for all of creation. As you begin to see your divinely aligned manifestations show up in your physical world, think like God thinks, and share any munificence with others with no expectation of anything back, including even a thank you if it's not forthcoming. As you place your intentions into your imagination and assume the feeling of those intentions being fulfilled, ask not for anything that is outside the great umbrella of love that is God. Lao Tzu, some 6 centuries or so earlier, reminds you that the great sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind, because kindness is his nature. If you can make your desires harmonize with the messages of the above passage while practicing humility and keeping your ego at bay, you will come to see the truth in Neville's observation that, quote, you never draw out of the deep of yourself that which you want. You always draw that which you are, unquote. The key here is the deep of yourself. That is your highest self.
I hope it is as obvious to you as it is to me that the collective ego will benefit when we transcend our individual egos. You, as a single individual, have a sacred quest. That quest involves coming to your higher spiritual nature and inviting it to show you the way of the sacred self in your daily life. This means denying the demands of your ego if those demands contradict the guidance of your higher self. Our world is a collection of individuals urged on by the loving presence within all of us to achieve the sacred quest personally and collectively. The world will become a peaceful, fulfilled, cooperative, loving, truthful, tolerant, and pure environment as the individual parts that make up the collective consciousness restrain their egos. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. The whole behaves precisely as does its individual parts. Many people I speak to tell me that they feel powerless to affect the global community. They believe that, given the scope of the world's problems, their efforts are so infinitesimal as to be insignificant. They simply are not seeing that it is precisely through a change in individual consciousness that the world will be transformed. All of the problems that we face as a group reflect those we have individually. The world is encountering a spiritual deficit that reflects our need to consciously get on the path of our sacred quest. The solution to individual and global problems is to overcome the spiritual deficit. When you make the shift in consciousness, allowing yourself to be an agent of heightened awareness, you are contributing to the transformation of our world. You are not separate from the other souls on this planet. You share the identical energy that embodies the souls of Rwanda and Pakistan, for example. You are the lamp, and God is the electricity. It flows through you as surely as it flows through all living things. When you make the decision to choose the guidance of your higher self over your false self, you have plugged into the divine inner energy. When you run your life based on the principles of the higher self, you are contributing to the transformation of the entire world. You must strengthen your will to choose the sacred path when your ego calls you a fool for believing there could ever be a world without war. If your ego can convince you, you will become part of the collective ego's falseness. Individuals who choose ego propaganda are individuals who will build more bombs and manufacture more weapons. Currently, there are some 6 billion people on the planet. About 3 million are at war or in skirmishes that cause them to kill and torture each other. But that means that there are 5,997,000,000 who are not at war. This is a hopeful statistic, which our egos do not want us to consider. By contrast, the collective ego strives to keep the populace nervously on the edge with reminders to view the world in terms of us versus them. This ego viewpoint not only reinforces the insane escalation of ways to kill each other, but is also responsible for most of our social problems. The world ego is our false self, and this is the primary characteristic that we need to recognize. We want to believe that we are our physical bodies, and that the territories we occupy are so important that we are willing to kill each other in order to maintain those boundary lines. We have become convinced that our true identities are located in tribal ancestries, traditions, histories, genealogies, and the color and shape of our bodies. We have lost sight of our authentic identities because of the labels that our egos have assigned to us. Our egos have coalesced into a worldwide false perception of ourselves based on an unwillingness to know our true spiritual nature. Although all of our spiritual leaders have reminded us of our divinity and implored and even commanded us to love one another, the world ego has won this battle and produced ancient enmities and uncountable horrors in the long history of humanity. As you travel the path of your sacred quest, you will help to dispel the absurdity of specialness that the ego so assiduously promotes. You will see an end to this kind of thinking in your life and on a worldwide scale as well. The higher part of ourselves that I have talked about on this tape reacts to a vision that is infinite. This is assuredly not the vision of the ego. The ego is just as cowardly on a collective scale as it is on an individual basis. The world ego is frightened of a mass appeal to overcome our spiritual deficit. When people face inward and embrace a more loving perspective, the power of the sacred self will create change not only in the community but in the entire world as well. The world ego will do all that it can to prevent this kind of inner approach. It will ridicule those who promote meditation, peaceful demonstrations, and the love of God as a way out of the morass of social evils. It is just as true on the collective level as it is on the individual plane. The higher self urges you to simplify and to avoid contributing to anything that hurts others or increases the separation from your spiritual source.
When Madame Blavatsky talked about who the leaders of the spiritual revolution would be, she said that these leaders will be ordinary people, regular, everyday folks, school teachers, musicians, artists, cab drivers, regular folks. And these people will speak out with a voice, and this voice will be heard, and then the bureaucracies will fall in line and begin to reflect what it is that this consciousness is instituting in our people. And if you look at the people who have been instrumental in changing consciousness in the last 25 years, you look at the people whose programs you listen to through Nightingale Congress and ask what are their backgrounds. You find out that they're salesmen. Marianne Williamson was a singer, a nightclub singer. Louise Hay was a dancer. Dennis Waitley was a salesman. Zig Ziglar was a preacher. People who just did everyday, regular things. I was a school teacher. And somehow there's a power, there's a pressure, there's something that has come and put us in a position of just talking about this kind of shift, this kind of consciousness.